All right, welcome H Radio 223 part-timers to the last pre-recorded lesson for the week, lesson 78, airtime, part 6 of 6. So closing off with this subsection here, references to the next level radio textbook, 9.9 integrated campaigns, 351 to 355, 9.9.1 digital integration 355 to 362, as well as activation integration 362 to 367. So quite a lot to cover there. I'm saying across the textbook, but also just to note that we have also looked at digital integration to a certain extent in terms of paid, earned, and owned media. We're just going to now see how it all comes together with what we have been learning so far through our journey in sales. Okay, so what I've also got is I've got two videos. The one is quite short. I'll start that up in just a moment. But the second one, I'm going to just start to play a portion of because it's I think it's very cool. It's a little bit of a summit, right? With 4 or 5 different people talking about integrated campaigns. And then if you want and if you'd like to watch it further, because it is 40 minutes long, then just hop on over to YouTube and just go and look at it and have just enjoy it for yourself. Okay. All right, but I will play about 15 minutes or so from that particular video just to close up. Okay. All right, so let me just get here. All right, and let's talk about integrated campaigns. It's all in one mum now. So we're talking about how everything comes together, both like on air as well as online, right? In modern radio campaigns, we don't actually focus only on what happens on air, but now, as we've said before, because we have so many different spaces and platforms that we are quote unquote alive for at 24 hours a day and also reaching larger markets and larger audiences, well, we make use of them quite well in 2025, right? It was a bit of a, it was definitely a bit of a rocky start to how it is that we could integrate like social media and how it was that we would integrate it effectively. But we found over the past couple of years, trial and error, and of course, I mean, you leading by example, certain other stations around the world had mastered that kind of, kind of wow, I mean, it's uncharted territory, before we did, and that's cool because I always say this. I mean, if you've had a longer lifespan within the industry, which the countries overseas have had, and with media in general, then 10 to 1, you're going to figure it out first. And we are obviously like navigating or progressing at our own pace, right? So let's have a look at the definition of integrated campaigns. Well, integrated radio campaigns are advertising campaigns that utilize more than just our on-air products, so such as power spots and generic spots, right? Integrated radio campaigns are designed to carefully manage campaigns across multiple types of media. So, for example, it could be TV shows, it could be magazines, it could be social media, and then we want to be able to obviously, once again, as I said, extend a wider audience, a reach to a wider audience, right? So developing an integrated radio campaign is based in developing a different communication activity because remember that each audience, even if you are the same person, you consume and you react and you enjoy or whatever it may be, or you require a different approach from someone that is let's say, like obviously procreating a specific piece of content or media, and is hoping that you would obviously like watch or indulge it or listen to it or whatever it may be, right? Or read it through, whatever. Right, so we have to obviously know the behaviors of the same listener on different platforms, what their behaviors are all about, the breakdown to, and an effective communication is in that platform to be able to utilize integrated media to its full extent. So, developing an integrated radio campaign is based in developing a different communication activity. And this is to deliver a coordinated and consistent message to the audience and achieve the goals that the advertiser has set. So, of course, the little picture there is something that we quite commonly have seen across, well, in different instances as we just kind of move along, showcasing how many different types of communication mediums there are out there, from our cloud existence right now to cellular, to of social media, to mailing, to varied aspects, just instant messaging and the gaming and so on, So there's the figure on the following slide will maps out the number of different areas as far as touch points that the consumer can use to engage the brand. It's important to bear in mind that not every radio station nor every advertising client will have access to these touch points, nor actually need them at any one given time, right? It's just a little too much to expect that you're going to be everywhere at the same time. And so what we do now is we look at again what is more effective and where we are most active. And so our audience is true with their own lifestyle definitions we get from or lifestyle specifics that we get from the composite listener, right in the beginning, as well as ongoing research and focus groups, so that we can say, okay, cool, great, let's focus on this or in this area, on this in this area. So it is, however, important that when radio stations design integrated campaigns, they do consider all the touchpads that they have access to, and once again, kind of whittle that down to what is most effective, right? So every station has numerous digital platforms available to them. 10 to 1, most stations will have an account on every single major platform. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, where we X now, we've got Facebook as well. There's one more. It's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube. I think that yeah, well, I'm not missing anyone. I don't think I'm missing anyone right now. But anyway, if I am, I'll just remember it. But those are the big ones right there, right? All of these elements provide ways in which the station can increase its own revenue, all right? Because things that we sell as part of our advertising and packaging, those deals that we do in digital data, right? So in digital marketing, where I've mentioned before, there's quite a few things I'm just going to recap on, but just shortly, though, that online advertising or online campaigns are extremely effective in terms of data mining, right? So knowing exactly who's interacting, it might be on, who is like where are they from? This is their information, whatever it may be. At a much smaller scale that you would if you are running research for RAMs, I do understand that. But, again, data information is priceless, and knowledge is even more. It's gold, to any one or other provider, right? So for our clients, for example, would love to have more data about potential customers and how to obviously use that information moving forward, right? So originally, data and activation opportunities were considered alternative streams of revenue, but as digital media required an increasingly large portion of advertising budgets, these have become integral to the execution of a radio campaign, right? Because, just as one point, it's not the only point, right? A lot of our listeners actually do not, and I've said this before, do not actually listen to the station, but rather enjoy podcasts, and they enjoy the social media aspect of a particular brand. So there's one opportunity for us to say, okay, well, look, listen, we want to obviously cater to a lot more than just our traditional radio listener and fan, right? So most South African radio stations estimate that the share of radio advertising spent in the integrated and non-traditional space is now around 40%. And that's from research that goes way back when. And so it might be a little bit more in 2025. So claim that this number is closer some, should I say, to 50%, right? So this means up to half of all money spent on radio stations is not being spent on generic spot schedules, but rather obviously in the integrated campaign field, right? So this represents a major shift from 20 to 25 years ago because we didn't have the technology I'm saying to you available and two, we had technology, but not close. I don't even think we didn't even have a social medium that was available 25 years ago besides instant messaging, so SMSing, right? Which is like the grandfather of all social mediums, right? Okay, so anyway, outside broadcasts as a commercial tool, so just kind of recap as to what we could have done and what we have done with outside broadcasts as an opportunity to, reach further audiences. And the rise of social media in advertising means that engagement is being desired by advertisers, not it's not enough just to show people like an advert, but they want people to engage with the content that is on social media. Otherwise, there is little to no return on investment. There's nothing that much we can do with likes and views. We need information. We need comments. We need, data once again to be able to say this was an effective online campaign, right? So, as radio is focused around intimate engagement between listeners and presenters and personalities, it works well alongside social media. And in the past, stations restricted advertisers to only making use of pre recorded advertising that was scheduled in standalone commercial breaks. And this keeps the line between advertising and editorial content very separate, right? However, as brands and businesses are increasingly becoming part of our content consumption, radio stations have now allowed that line to blur. So again, just kind of like sum that up in layman's terms, we 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 were in a and that's what growth is, right? So growth in the industry is super important for it to remain relevant, and for radio stations, not to replace again the radio medium by no means, right? TV will not be replaced by anything. Radio will not be replaced by anything. Digital print will not be replaced by anything, right? It won't. What we've seen is just an increase, like in terms of the scope of different types of mediums and media that have been consumed and accepted into like our consumers' lives, right? So you as a consumer have now made room for podcasts and streaming and digital radio and again social media, etc., etc., etc. Right? We haven't really given one up for another. Because anyone who does say that is pretty much, I'm not saying they're lying, they might have, let's say, lessened the amount of time that they do spend on radio because of the way that they do enjoy maybe podcasts or podcasts a lot more, right? But they don't say that one replaces the other. There's just no chance of that. The only way that that could happen is if they had absolutely no interest in radio in the beginning, and now that they have other options available, there's nothing that will convince that particular consumer to consider radio, for example, otherwise, right? So the days when you could shout one generic message at hundreds of thousands of listeners, often with falsely differing interests and psychographic profiles, and worry only about the metrics of reach and frequency are now gone because again, now in digital, we can be very specific about the metrics. We can be very specific about the type of listener, their interests, the people that they or the brands that they follow, their age, their gender, their whatever it may be, right? So we can do all of that and really make it very specific so that in their timelines, like these particularly catered ads are now popping up, right? So they still need to, advertisers do still need to meet these basic metrics, but they have become increasingly willing to sacrifice a wide-reaching advert for a more meaningful metrics, for more meaningful metrics such as engagement and interaction, right? And again, it does say, yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, sure, if you're doing it via a commercial station, but even if you are self let's say you're a sole proprietor of your own business and you want to go and advertise for yourself on social media, it is super cheap. I keep saying this. It is very affordable and it's also very easy to learn. It takes a couple of hours, I'm saying, of like hardcore learning, and then kind of extending that learning through trial and error, and then watching a couple more YouTube videos, taking a particular course in it, or whatever it may be, right? Do anything that you can, but you will be able to put together a campaign for yourself, even. And that's how easy and cheap it actually is, right? One that you can afford, based on, let's say, your daily, your daily budget, $500 a day. I want to do this for, let's say, 5 days or 10 days or whatever it may be. And the return on investment could actually be quite valuable, because of the way that you have constructed this particular campaign. That's the really important thing, once again. So, radio, on the other hand, is intimate because it works on two levels. The one level is the relationship that we do build between the listener and the brand. We know that, right? So, the second level is the relationship between the listener and the presenter. So, that presenters have now become more central to attracting and retaining listeners. And this is heightened, obviously, by the explosion and the use of influencers. Okay. So, okay, we do have, and we have discussed many a time, many whatever it is about what an influencer and a content professional, right, is, and we're in the business of content professionals, not influencers. Okay, so integrated radio campaign where a presenter aligns himself with a brand, of course, and then engages further with the brand through social media, live activations is very attractive to a lot of advertisers, right? Because of the backing of the station. That is it. Because the station is the pedestal for this particular presenter that to stand on, as well as all that work that they've put in the presenter. I'm saying to build relationships with people. I'm saying that do listen to the station. That's why this particular approach is valuable, right? Anything else, actually, I'm sorry, isn't, right? So we do have a number of influencers, like professional influencers, that do have that effect. And everybody else, I'm sorry, but it's not that and a bag of chips, right? So it enables them to secure additional integrated value for their campaign more effectively than buying up separate media campaigns and trying to connect with them. And the ability for presenters to connect with listeners 24/7 has contributed hugely, because now you don't have to wait for the 30-second or 3 minute spot. Like, you can see it anytime you want, and the algorithms on social media allow that kind of repetitive and kind of that like prioritized, especially if it's paid for media, right? Content, right, to be pushed up and seen by a whole lot more people, and obviously enticed by perhaps those that do engage, right? So, what marketer would not want to extend listener engagement with their brand across the day, the week, or the year? These are always on campaigns, and South African stations are very flexible regarding how they allow brands to engage with their audiences, right? Most stations allow brands to play a central role in primetime live. I just want to move this over, but content, right? Okay. So, does the lack of focus on fiercely protecting content make for a worse listening experience for South Africans? I don't know. I, 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 Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I don't really think it's about the let's say the integrated campaign that's affecting the quality of what we hear on radio, the quality of the content or the service that it delivers. If the station is not doing a good job, then the station is not doing a good job, right? Regardless of what you feel. I'm saying to you, or they feel like, oh well, maybe this is like dampening our loss of creativity. No, that's really an excuse, right? So, like most things in a creative environment, this depends entirely on the quality of the content around the campaign it is built on. And the campaign is conceptualized and implemented by somebody who does not understand what listeners are looking for. If they don't, it's going to absolutely fail, right? Okay. So it's not just about being a digital marketer. That's fine. It doesn't that's all good. It's like being an accountant. But if you don't know how to be an accountant for a station, or being an HR manager for a station, don't know, we look at these corporate jobs and we say no, but you got to understand the environment in which you're working in, and in this case, the medium that you're working with. Otherwise, like whatever you do, even to your best ability and its quality level is high, might be of a high quality in a different context, but in this one, it isn't, right? So we hear these campaigns all the time where clients or the agencies insist that listeners answer boring product related questions or that presenters must endorse a service that does not match with their personal and organic choices, right? I still say, because the thing is that it happens to this day. The reason why we're answering boring questions, right, is to make sure that listeners have a chance to win and that we definitely have a winner, right? As opposed to just risking just too much of a creative angle and also risking like disinterest, say, for someone to say, oh, I don't think I can come up with a cool story, or I don't think I've got like a funny way to, for example, it's one of the previous ones, smash cakes or whatever it may be, whatever it is, I don't, and so I won't enter, right? And that's the approach I'm saying to you, is that that's how we keep it kind of simple in a lot of cases, because the client says, listen, I don't care about creativity. I just want my product, I'm saying, to be out there, make it very clear, obviously make it vibrant and lively and have fun or whatever it is, and make sure that someone winning a car or winning a whole bunch of money are excited about winning that bunch of money, and not so much answering the question of what is the tagline of Coca-Cola at this moment, or what like what is the website address of Takealot, like takealot.co.za. So what if it's boring, name three items that are featured in the, what I'm saying, in the Checkers winter sale. Who cares, man? Like, it's just it's easy and it is accessible. A campaign conceptualized by people with extensive radio content experience and who understand how to retain a listener can be hugely successful, not just for the advertiser, but also for the station as well. We do want situations, in which we are extremely creative so that we can, and this is the only reason, right? So that we can create a buzz. In other words, be in newspapers covered by this, So we're going to create something that really was like, it really shook the country, or it shook our province, or it shook this, whatever it is, yeah, because it was just so out the box and so cool. That's great. It's fun. Great ideas and great radio comes in parts. Good radio is something that you can do every single day. A well thought out integrated radio campaign can add, of course, to the listener experience. But let's look at digital integration and social media have increasingly become popular ways for marketers to reach audiences. So this is again a 2019 stat. South Africa has the sixth highest rate of internet usage in the world, with the average person spending more than 8 hours per day online and approximately 23 million people on social media. So naturally, a client will say, look, we live in this country, why not? And you'd think, that because we're a third world country, in other words, like that is defined by infrastructure, knowledge for science and maths, etc., right? Whatever it may be, right? Competencies for those type of engineering related subject, whatever it is, right? Or science subjects. That doesn't mean that we can't use a phone we don't like, for example, Instagram, right? All right, so naturally, a client with a product or service to sell would want to ensure that it has presence where that particular listener is likely to be. So, digital integration. Well, let's take a break. Let's watch that one video. second. Let me just pop on over there. It's here, and it was. Yep.
Hello, welcome to our second.
That was the last one. That's the last one. It's this one now.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Tyler Pyburn of the Pulse Network of thepulsenetwork.com. Here having a conversation leading up to the Great Content Shift in the 2012 NAB show, and that's where the Great Content Shift is going to be full on display. Now, we're talking right now with John Potter, Advertising Bureau. And John, let's talk about the media salespeople in particular, because obviously that's what you deal with more often than not. So why are agencies and advertisers really right now asking for the integrated marketing campaigns from the media salespeople? It's not just one part. They're asking for kind of a suite of solutions, if you will.
Correct. A suite of media.
Yeah,
Digital,
exactly.
Traditional, bringing it all together. And if we call maybe mobile and social something a little different than digital. Digital generally meaning more of it certainly is digital, but it's the online.
Online, yep.
A couple things are happening. We have this convergence of two forces taking place. Number one, we see that the advertising agencies have pretty much been squeezed through consolidation, through as well just simple cutbacks. And so they're asking their people to do more with less, and that means that agency people that used to sit down and have a nice conversation with you and all the media would have opportunity to listen to what you had to say. Now they really don't have time to listen to all the media reps that want their valuable time. A second aspect, though, that is really taking place is that there are so many more media. Imagine the number of people that are contacting each individual media agency buyer, contacting advertisers, just Main Street advertisers. And I just heard a statistic that the average business receives 3 telephone calls a week from .coms, from interactive salespeople.
Really?
So I mean, you multiply that over the course of the year, and all of the other traditional media reps, there's no time for it. So we, as media reps, need to be able to represent multiple media, and radio, as an example, can be on air, or the mobile, digital, social, all the things we've talked about. We can go in and we can help those advertisers who are time-starved by presenting a lot of different solutions to their one advertising objective or two objectives they may have.
It's the convergence of media. I mean, it's all coming together under one roof at the end of the day, because, I always laugh when I hear people say, well, radio is dead because radio advertising. You're forgetting that radio is doing a lot more than that now, isn't it?
Well, it is, and radio is better than flat over the last year. That's pretty good for a traditional medium that's got a lot of competition out there. So we're actually up last year.
I love it. John, honestly, pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking time. Really great stuff. Really a pleasure.
My pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Here's John Potter of the Radio Advertising Bureau. I am Tyler Pyburn of the Pulse Network. I want to thank you guys so very much for being part of our conversation leading up to the 2012 NAB show.
Off there. All right, let's go back. We'll come back to the summit, which I think you're going to find at least insightful. Let me just stop that share and just get back to the lesson here, and let's finish up lesson. Right, okay. Again, so these particular slides you're going to see we've gone through again to before in previous lessons, so I'm just going to jump over them. But let's look at digital integration, right? Okay, so radio stations, of course, like any other business, have a number of digital and social media tools, and obviously platforms that are available to them to make use of. So stations use social media platforms, want to communicate with our audiences, and of course to build up that brand loyal community. And we've seen that in certain, like, everyone's kind of doing the same rinse cycle repeat of certain things. There'll be like promotional posts, and then there'll be content posts, there'll be kind of recycled posts, there'll be whatever kind of bit like visual posts, audio posts, whatever it may be, and that's okay. No one's really looking for anything out the box specifically on social media, because Like because of well, my first reason is because of the low attention span, right? So 8 to 12 seconds, it was actually low. I think it was 5 to 7 seconds. Specifically on TikTok is what you will give a particular video, the chance to grab your attention. So the scrolling, I'm saying to you, the scrolling and bypassing of, let's say, post is it's so incredibly quick, right? That we'd have to actually measure out like what is the attention span and the tolerance of a particular user on a particular social medium, because it really does vary, and it then obviously varies depending on what it is that they do see there, right? Okay, so again, TikTok very different to Instagram, very different to Facebook, very different from X, and definitely different to YouTube as well, right? So the image in the next slide then lists what we've seen before. Just want to go here, right? Remember this here, right? About digital media, earned digital media, and paid. And we're talking about cost per clicks, and then comments, for example, and earned and sharing, whatever it may be. And then our own particular sources of digital media, for example, our microsites, our websites, our blog sites, our own social media pages as well. We've done this before, and so I don't want to recap that, because once again we're going to do this just here, right? So let's quickly do a quick recap and revision of what is own digital media. Well, it is our own space that we can go and share advertising and marketing on free of charge, right? So, podcasting, audio streams, the websites, the microsites are usually built by a station when they are running big integrated campaigns. So, for example, like so the microsite exists on, let's say, the main website, right? And let's say it's a separate page, and it has its own, obviously, like content, whatever it may be, which makes perfect sense, right? And that's a microsite, for example. Like a blog site is normally very rare. It's more for an individual, right? But blog sites are also, I'm saying, yeah, that you can consider news that is being updated on a website as part, like that's a blog site. I mean, you're literally going from news piece to news piece. And the only way I consider with surety is because if I look at, let's say, my website, that all the news, quote unquote, the articles, right, that I do post there are actually just a blog. I mean, it's just a blog. I mean, it's set out structured like a blog. I'm saying on the back end, and so we can say the same thing there, right? Okay, these days radio stations are also they also do have mobile apps if it's worth the financial investment, right? Because just to have an app that once rinse like a repeat, if it doesn't do anything more than give you a very refined but also a very unique experience as an app user, then I see nothing, no point in downloading an app that basically only imitates like a stream and maybe profiles. No one needs that. You just go to the site, man, which hardly no one does intentionally. They normally navigate to social media for more information about a particular product or a profile or whatever it may be, right? So owned digital media continued. The focus is on convenience, because you can do what you need to do without having to ask permission or having to go like jump through certain hoops and pay for this, and kind of like, whatever it is, define and whatever detail. Well, it's so many things that move over to, let's say, paid media, right? All stations make use of social media, right? And social media allows radio shows and presenters to have access to their market and allows the audience more access to stations. So most again, like I know that my followers, I know this sounds awful, but whatever it is, doesn't they wouldn't listen to my show, but they listen to the podcast instead, and because it's just not, like I say, it's out of people's interest to listen to radio, more so these days than ever before, right? Okay, all right. So earned digital media is, of course, we're going on to the shares. So digital media is the online equivalent of word of mouth. Okay, so if somebody shares a certain story, it's not to say because you trust them so much. We know we live in the day of age of headliners only, but okay, like a share normally encourages other people to also share. You know, they'll save, they'll bookmark, they'll share, whatever it may be. And so that's earned media. We don't have to pay a single cent for that. Social media use is growing rapidly in South Africa with 5 million new users between 2018 and 2019, and so many more in 2025. The average South African has 8 social media accounts, right? I'm not so sure that that is correct in 2025 because we had a bit of the narrative saying that you have to exist everywhere, right, to not miss out on something. But we've found that that is exhausting, and we don't navigate a lot to a certain or 2 or 3 of social mediums. So we've decided to kind of delete our accounts or whatever it is and stick to the stuff that really works for us, right? And also might work for our service. So we are an independent service as a person in my station. And so we find that that obviously works better for us to choose only TikTok or only YouTube or only, right? So this means that social media is becoming increasingly important for reaching consumers. And social media also allows businesses and brands to observe and monitor consumer behavior, learn about their changing habits, their interests, priorities, and adapt their marketing approach to suit these trends. Remember, I said to you about information and data. Yeah, this gives it to you directly. Right. So paid digital media is when you have a campaign and we decide, listen, yeah, with the campaign, it's worth it. It's worth paying and force feeding like a campaign across, for example, not only, let's say, our followers, right? But people like our followers that may follow another station or other stations, right? So competitors, right? That we can grab their attention to. And that's easy because let's say you want to hold up an ad, you say, well, okay, we're also looking for people that do listen or love radio as an interest or hobby. They do listen to podcasts, they do listen to streaming services, they are fans of, for example, Metro 5, this, that, whatever it is. And well, I mean, the medium, saying the medium that you're on, the platform, social media, will find and only post this particular campaign within the feed of that particular user, right? So co-marketing is when 2 brands form a medium-term exclusive alliance to support a single message through a shared campaign. What does that mean? The intention is to pool marketing resources for the station to take a portion of the value of the sales in order to execute the integrated campaign and implement paid digital media, right? So the station can utilize the budget. So we get that from the client, right? So we can utilize the budget to purchase pay-per-click campaigns. So you obviously know the term right now because we've used the acronym before. Or place promoted posts on, for example, Twitter, Instagram, etc., right? Meta. So they can also use the budget to and buy social media advertising space as per the strategy and targets set up with the client, right? So here we go. The images on the next page offer an idea of different types of digital media. And this you've seen before. Remember when we said here, there's a little bit of a breakdown per post, and obviously this at a commercial level, you know, where it breaks down what a Twitter post is. Obviously, there's the followers for this particular unknown station, whatever it may be, right? But what's more important is also, or at least kind of more important, right? It's kind of like the packages that people might buy. For example, it says that, we're going to have a competition. There's, the website itself gets about 270K hits per month, 2 Facebook posts, 2 tweets, 2 Instagram posts, 1 Instagram post, all for 75,000 Rand. Okay. And this is based on reality. Obviously, there's different models, right? And measures, which we have once again covered before. So I do not want to bore you like going over it again. Please look at obviously the different versions of what you would do, like on a schedule, right? Like Monday through obviously to Saturday, Sunday, right? And what the posts might look like. But please also note that this is not a full digital strategy, right? So in a full digital strategy, you want to know exactly, like obviously the time, the platform, the days, like we need the post itself, we need the captions, we need all hashtags, we need the client's name, we need a whole bunch of details, right? To be able to let's say set out a, let's say for the month over here, the copy will be on Instagram, let's say, and it'll be a lot more, like I say, extensive than just this over here. All right. Okay, so just with this, so I don't want to, I'm not going to go over what we've already seen in videos, okay? Because we have, remember way back when I played you a couple of videos on paid media, owned media, and earned media so that you can understand the examples between. This is just some refreshers there, which you can have a look at and enjoy further, right? I don't think it's called, the question is not called 111, but I'm quite sure it's maybe 1.1.1, right? Activity 9C, page 367. All right, so let's close up the lessons for the week, but also this particular lesson with this summit here. And as much as we can actually watch, it's interesting enough. And if you do need any more details on the summit itself, okay. Here's the details of it. Sorry, let me just go there.
Panel discussion for today. This one is looking at
Campaign Radio and Audio Summit 22, effectively integrate radio in multi-channel strategies. So definitely exactly up our alley. Let's hear what the experts have to say.
how you can effectively integrate radio in your multi-channel strategy campaigns. I've got three panelists today. First is Harry Lang, he's a CMO at Stint. There's Amir Ali, who's Innovation Strategy Manager at Mitchells and Butlers. And our second, and Rebecca Frank, who's a Content Director at KISS. Rebecca, I'm going to kick off with you, if that's okay. I'm guessing you're going to be pretty much a big flag waver for radio, aren't you? And that it's still a powerful medium and one that we should be using as a vital platform for content and for campaigns.
I think you said it all. Completely agree. Next question. 100%. A huge advocate, and I've been in radio for a long time, so I've seen it go through many different guises. And obviously, we are not just an audio medium anymore. We are a lifestyle brand at KISS, which means we do operate on all platforms. But in terms of the superpowers of radio, which is what I would really like to talk about, that a lot of advertisers and clients have discovered in the pandemic, and continued to be, converted spenders with radio. It's the flexibility. It's an agile medium. We can turn things around very quickly. The fact that we're always on, that consistency, that repetition and frequency, as well as being able to disrupt our own sort of schedule for pop-up moments and powerful, impactful one-offs. And the sort of the creativity that we can really bring to campaigns is something that I really like, because everything that we do comes through a human being. Ultimately, it's a very profound thing about the medium, and a very kind of different thing to many others, that it really is through the voice and connecting with the imagination of the person on the receiving end. So there's a lot of emotional intelligence that goes into sort of the creativity of a radio show and a radio link or a radio campaign. And I think that's just really kept us on our toes during the pandemic. And like I say, we've just had so many sort of new spenders and audiences come to radio over the past sort of 2 years because of that companionship and that warmth that the medium can bring. So anyway, I could do like an entire sort of thesis on how brilliant radio is. So I don't want to bore everybody. So I'll stop there and let you carry on.
No, I'm just going to sort of add to that. Really, we touched on it. We had a panel earlier this morning where we kind of touched a little bit on demographics. But I wanted to ask about KISS. As a platform, as a brand, if you like, is it easy because you've kind of got this ready-made target audience, haven't you? You've got this demographic there in place, I suppose. Or is that being a little bit too simplistic?
Well, I would say it's too simplistic, because I need to keep my job and make it sound really mysterious and high level. But no, I would say actually at KISS we've got a very broad audience in terms of age and demographic, and that's a real challenge actually, because we all need to ban the bland. We all need to get rid of generic sort of approaches and scattergun when it comes to reaching audiences. So what we do with our sort of literally 15 to 40-year-old audience is we utilize different platforms and different zones of the network and different voices in order to hit different people that are all united under a brand, a mindset, a young at heart, good time, energetic, social currency kind of brand, which is what I think the things that really kind of underpin KISS. But we really do have everybody from a sort of an 18-year-old who's incredibly into new music all the way to a 40-year-old who's a real lean back listener who's never heard of TikTok, and we'd apply, you know, different tactics on those different platforms. So we've got the most live stages, I would say, brands that are similar to KISS and KISS in radio, so many live stages compared to older demographic radio brands like Magic, for example. It's another Bauer brand where, yes, you still have 20 years on paper in that target audience set perhaps, but the difference between either end of it is much, much smaller. So yeah, for us, it's just diversifying on platforms. We have 3 radio stations, 4 internet stations, and 1 million, you know, social platforms as well. So yeah, it's a lot more complicated, but yeah, we do have a sort of strong mindset that everyone's united under.
I mean, just to sort of expand on this a little bit, because it does seem to me that the beauty of radio is that you can effectively reach a large chunk of people at the same time, and that it's easier to get messaging across and targeting and so on. So does it still have that power to provide these kind of water cooler moments? Does it still have that credibility, you know, buzzword of the moment, I suppose, to an extent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been listening a lot about podcasts and people having their headphones in and kind of, you know, listening to a one-to-one, but radio, I mean, we're lucky the demographic we're trying to reach are people who are driving to work, you know, they listen to commercial radio in their car, they're builders working on roofs for their big sort of thing, and we sell food, and everyone, you know, from our site, one of the biggest problems is everyone wants to eat at the same time. But that's great from if you're trying to reach people when they're hungry. Also, we're looking at our figures. The pandemic has completely changed how people eat. So previous to the pandemic, most of our occasions were eating out with family. Now that's kind of completely changed, and most of them are catching up with friends. So it's really important that you can reach different people in different houses, different households, who come up sort of have the same idea and saying, oh, let's get together and meet at, you know, one of our restaurants, one of our pubs. So being able to reach everyone at this virtual water cooler is essential for our recovery, to get people back out as groups, you know, a group of 10 friends. And I've got to say it's predominantly women who are coming back in groups, but it's so important to try and get that. And you can't do that through the other channels. You can't reach everyone at the same time and kind of like get them to think the same thing through the other channels. It's so hard.
Should it then be treated separately as a separate sort of platform from a multi-channel approach, or can it sort of sit within a multi-channel campaign?
I can't really answer that, but what I can tell you is we were early adopters in multi-channel. So I was just looking back. In 2010, we had James Corden, which we could never afford now, did a campaign for Toby Carvery, and he did this it was a multi-channel campaign. Back then, we didn't have great traction on social. We didn't really have a lot of Facebook users, but since we had him, I mean, we had that's the first time we reached 100,000 likes on and users on our Facebook page. And it was a poll, and polls are I can't get away from polls on LinkedIn, but it was a poll on which is your favorite Carvery meat, which was spearheaded by him. So that's the other great thing about radio. People in offices or whatever, they're listening to the radio, but they're on their keyboard. So to you know, cognitively, that if you can integrate everything, that's how you know, I'm sorry I'm rambling here, but the other thing we have a problem with is, one, awareness isn't great, but that translating awareness to consideration is one of our biggest challenges. But doing it through multi-channel, we get them on the radio, then they engage one of our socials. It translates to them coming. No, I don't think you can do it in isolation, because if you're not integrating them, you're diluting your spend. So, like, in a way, one of my biggest struggles is we used to have big spend on radio. Now we don't, because they're spending a lot on social and stuff. But if you don't use something big and broadcast, you lose traction. You don't get that amplification. So I guess the short answer is no, it can't be standalone. It needs to be integrated into everything you're doing.
Great. Okay. Howard, does that sort of ring any bells with you? I mean, I know you've sort of gone from working in house now to sort of working with agency works and so on. I mean, is this sort of telling with your experience of radio?
Yeah, no, I'd probably disagree a tiny bit with Amir, but he's obviously coming from very specifically his point of view with M&B. Historically, I've seen radio fitting in both camps. Some of the beauty of it is the fact that you can get very good value reach, and the fact that you can localize so implicitly. These networks across the UK and internationally, you can target very specific cities with radio, and you can switch it on very quickly as well. So in terms of direct response activity, if I wear my old hats, in the gambling industry, and prior to that with client work, you could turn around a radio campaign in under a week. You'd be live the week later. If you're selling cars, pizzas, house insurance, whatever you want, if you've got a special on to respond to market conditions, you can switch it on incredibly quickly. And I think you can do it as a standalone on the DR side. In the brand side, which possibly is where Amir is coming from, I do think it has a richer purpose integrated with other channels. I think the sum being greater than the parts, combined with TV, combined with maybe out of home as well. I think radio has a very rich offering to give. And some of these channels, KISS as an example from Rebecca's experiences, very hard to reach demographics. Although I am disappointed to hear that at 44, I'm not allowed to listen to KISS anymore.
You're out, mate.
But,
unless you've got a radar diary, in which case you're very welcome to ticket.
Oh, there we go. But it is tough to reach demographics, easy to switch on, very much a good value way to build weight behind your brand campaign. So it's kind of got that jack of all trades capability depending on your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Can I say a really quick thing, Matt?
Yeah.
Sorry, super quick, which is just that two things. Like one is, there's just the very nature that radio can either be a lean in or a lean back medium means that you can obviously multitask, which is the beauty of radio. So therefore, it being on social at the same time as being at an event or an activation, as well as being on the radio. Like a lot of I would say the majority of our campaigns, obviously for a brand like KISS, are multi-platform for that very reason. So that, both through airtime or a sponsorship and promotions activation and through other mediums that they're buying, that audience can second screen, if you like, and can really pick it up. But also, I think it's kind of what you're alluding to there, Harry, in terms of the standalone piece. Like at Bauer, we've got kind of Octave, digital advertising kind of outlet where we can really target, really personalize, and people that can be part of a package sort of thing, but some people just really kind of go in on that. So it can be both. But yeah, I just wanted to chip in with that from a Bauer point of view.
Yeah, Harry, come please. Yeah.
No, it was me. I was trying to.
Sorry, man.
But even if you think it's single, so if we put a lot of spend into, we do with global, I'm afraid, but like I say, it's all out there, but we own a lot of outdoors because we own a lot of big sites with outdoor posters, which we own ourselves. So if you put your money into radio and you integrate the two, as you're driving past one of our posters, it kind of ends up being multi-channel. Not what you call multi-channel, but it is. You're reaching people in more than one way, and it really amplifies that. That's the beauty of it. And people are in their cars a lot, so I think it's really important. It doesn't have to be multi in terms of you're spending money in lots of different things, but it's just getting that awareness and that repetition and people seeing and hearing you. If people can see and hear you, we were talking about subways. People are constantly walking past subways, and if they hear a Subways ad as they're walking past it or see one of their A boards, it just kind of like you get that amplification. So that's why it's so important, I think. So I'm saying you can't ignore radio. That's kind of what I'm saying.
I was going to ask Harry, how sort of important is creative in that? But to get that amplification and that cut through, and to get people to see and hear, as Amir was just saying there, does it have to be big budget stuff, or can you sort of do it fairly comfortably?
No, I think you can do it comfortably. It's like with any creative medium. If you've got a strong concept and a strong call to action, and you execute it well, which doesn't mean big budgets, I think good ideas can sing through in a radio medium. And last year, I was talking a lot about earworms, and we're doing it in context of radio as well as TV advertising. But, creating earworms that aural mnemonics that relate to the brand. There's so much scope in that space to give people something that just triggers a positive thought related to your brand. And I think, like with any creative medium, you put the effort into that process, you concentrate on the audience and what's going to engage with them and entertain them, quite frankly, then you can get a win without, hiring George Clooney to do your voiceover. I don't think, there's a lazy way to look at it, which is big budget, celeb voiceovers, etc., etc. And for most of us, we don't want to and can't afford to go down that path. So, the mother of invention is to come up with something which is going to get stand out and choose your radio media breakdown to get the right sort of audience. And for me now, I've got an interesting challenge because I've got two audiences at stints, one of whom is a student audience, 18 to 25-year-olds who want to do stints to work in the hospitality trade. And the other is hospitality general managers and owners who are probably 20 to 60 years old. Now, I can't do that with the same execution. And the student side is probably going to be more prevalent in terms of city targeting. But, you can imagine it's a very different brief to look at when one brand sits over the top of it. I'm quite looking forward to that challenge, in fact, 'cause I do think radio is going to have a seat at that table, especially digitally linked to regular radio. Because I want to target students when they're at their university towns, which isn't where they are, maybe registered to live. So there's a media purchasing plan and a creative requirement plan and a temporal, when do I switch it on and off plan. I think radio is going to be quite a handy media for me when I get down that route.
This is what I'd like to sort of chuck out to everybody, really. But you're talking there about messaging and so on, and I guess this is relevant for all sides of the fence. But are there challenges with things like tone of voice and so on, and the way sort of messaging is sort of brought across, especially as we're sort of cautiously crawling out of hopefully out of the pandemic? Is that still a major challenge?
Do you mean sort of like getting the tone right? Is that an issue?
Basically, yeah.
I'll go first, just from our point of view, sort of programming and campaign point of view. We felt closer than ever to our audience over the past sort of couple of years. So I wouldn't say it's all been rosy. There's been obviously huge shifts in audience behaviour and everything during the pandemic, but I think we've had an even more intimate relationship with our audience due to their sort of listening habits, having changed, perhaps wild generalization, but the sense of companionship being even more valuable than ever that a medium like radio can bring. So we've had a lot of feedback and have allowed our sort of, our presenters to bring even more of themselves to the kind of microphone, although we're absolutely in this country not all in the same boat, and I won't subscribe to that motto. I think that there was something that really united the whole country. So, I think there's always a day-to-day for campaigns on the radio and on social media. It has to be a daily check on the nation's mood, judging the sort of temperature, etc., of feelings around Boris Johnson, or, how funny to be with something or not, or whatever. But I don't think it's been any more difficult during the pandemic. If anything, we've been even more in tune with our audience personally, just from a KISS point of view, but it's always something we have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point I was getting at is radio, in terms of campaigns, able to offer that kind of flexibility in terms of turning messaging around fairly quick, because that is something that we've seen a lot of across various industries, I think, over the past couple of years, this idea of quick reactions and so on. It does seem to me that radio's a great, an ideal platform really for that sort of maneuverability. Yeah,
I mean, from the ridiculous to sort of when there were the big story in the news about a load of students that were suddenly trapped in halls, and we managed to activate with KFC, one of our partners, to send a bunch of university students a load of KFC that afternoon. There's sort of fun things like that, all the way to doing event radio moments when lockdown was first announced, when we knew that a bunch of festivals had been cancelled. But also, like I say, it's still sort of goes on all the time with radio that we're all waiting for a Sue Gray report, and that's not something we're going to be ignoring on KISS. We're going to, have some fun with it, and we're actually trying to, get hold of a listener who's called Sue Gray that's going to deliver her own report on KISS this week. So, these are just brilliant fun things that the brilliant team here come up with that are meant to sort of be escapist and entertain, but also be sensitive and be there for the listeners. So yeah, I mean, obviously I would say this, but I feel like we've got a real superpower in that way.
And do brands sort of buy into that as well? That they sort of come on board with that because that's part of the KISS ethos or philosophy or whatever?
Yeah, I think a phrase that a lot of clients and agencies are using at the moment in conversations is cultural moments and cultural relevancy, and whether that is about being part of a conversation about mental health, if there's a particular temperature check or conversation going on, so whether there's a real planned seasonal approach to that, or whether it is just brands really wanting to be part of a zeitgeist conversation that popped up overnight, whether it is the Brits or whether it is International Women's Day, either end of that spectrum. Cultural moments and agility has been something that has probably been the biggest basis of our conversations with agencies. So a lot of our partnership deals and shapes at present have had a lot of very fixed things, but a lot of kind of flexi plots and a lot of very flexible bits of inventory that we can really have conversations every week with clients and with agencies to make sure that, well, what are we doing next week? Let's leave a blank space in that running order with that inventory until we know what everybody really cares about, and then help you to tap into that.
Amir, are you a fan of the new agility?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important, and also that cliche about radio being your friend. So it's getting that tone of voice right all the time, and then being able to flex, because that mood does change, and things change. Things change very quickly. People want to like you, and it's so important in the whole brand building and becoming familiar. That's one of the most important things of brands, because they are sort of, your demographic is so important. So you kind of need to temperature check what they're feeling, what they're saying, what the conversations are, and it's much easier to do with radio. And there's social radio coming up as well, and it is very important to keep your finger on the pulse with what people are doing.
Harry, does that sort of present opportunities or challenges, or a bit of both?
It's always a bit of both, Matt. It's as marketers, every day is the opportunity day. We look for cracks of chance and chances to spend less money to get more bang for buck. That's all we do. And whether it's brand building or direct response, I think the tone of voice question I was interested by in that. For me, I spend a lot of time doing brand marketing pieces for clients when I have my consultancy, and I'm doing another one now. Tone of voice for your brand should be fairly clearly defined before you even think about channels, before you even think about execution. That's part of the architecture alongside personality, mission, positioning, and that feeds into every brief. And getting the creative and the right channels. I think KISS is an interesting one for me because of that student audience I've got, and actually I want to not only look at it as a media to carry a radio campaign. It's going to be a learning exercise. I want to learn more about my audience. I want to learn it from a channel expert. I mean, chances are I'll be, asking Rebecca to have a chat after this, because, the channels are the experts in the spaces where their audience live. And the piece, Rebecca, you said about conversations and then having an opinion, this is it. You have a relationship with your audience. It isn't fire and forget. You have a relationship that they trust in the media that you're carrying. And by advertising on that channel, you're buying in an amount of that trust. But it's going to ring pretty hollow if you don't get your tonality correct for that channel. So there is an interconnected relationship there, and the successful radio ads be the one that are bespoke for the audience on the channel they're existing in. If it's a young audience, it's got to be a bit fun. Is it a bit edgy? Because they'll like that more than they will something that's preachy and old school. So I think there's a creative and tonality challenge. And if your brand doesn't fit in that space, you're probably in the wrong medium. You probably shouldn't be fighting in the youth radio space. So I think all of this is contextually about the fit. And that's part a media planning piece, part creative and part strategic.
Whatever expectations does that sort of audience have? I mean, in particular around things like purpose, are they expecting brands now to have a voice beyond just trying to sell us something?
It's like that hateful word purpose that is floating around marketing like a bad smell. Purpose, I think, inherently is about behaviors. It's about behaviors that we should all be enacting anyway, quite frankly. The moment a brand starts talking about its purpose, it's probably not actually acting on those behaviors. It's hard selling itself as being a good actor in mental health, a good actor in LGBTQ, for example. And actually, I dislike it inherently. I think these behaviors should be inherent and not lent upon as marketing devices. Your brand should live and breathe these behaviors if it believes them to be correct and appealing for its audience. But the purpose question, there was a very good article I read this week, actually. I can't remember exactly who it was by, but it was talking about purpose. And effectively, once you bring that name into a marketing strategy meeting, you're already losing the battle. You're already on the wrong kilter. So I think inherently brands should act well. Good brands should act well. Good brands should have behaviors that their audience will respect and appreciate and be able to engage with. That's all true. But don't put your hat on a peg marked purpose and say, aren't we awesome? Because by definition, you probably aren't.
Rebecca, does that sort of is that something you agree with? Are we hopefully living in a post-purpose age now?
I'm just getting the pom-poms out to cheerlead behind Harry at this point, because actions speak louder than words, like, anyway. All our mums told us that. But I think we know that the under 40 audience, incredibly broad thing to say, but for the purposes of being on a panel, I'll just discuss that, make decisions incredibly quickly in an incredibly cluttered market. So if, there is a sniff of inauthenticity, or bandwagoning, or not being able to back something up, it means there's a lot of pressure on brands, but so there should be. And if the battle for attention is higher than ever, for us, it's thumb time, whether that's clicking on an app, whether that's clicking on social media. Really, we're not trying to get 18-year-olds to run out and buy DAB radios. Of course, we'd absolutely love that to be every school leaver's gift. We've got to compete well and be quality and mean it. So yes, that does mean that we need to have talent that means what they say, as well as having very clear cut-through campaign moments that help our audience in that sea of choice at a glance, out the corner of their eye, know what we stand for. And clients that work with us well in this space have exactly that philosophy, that it is not it's not a time to sort of clamour layers of key messages to cling on to the kind of, bus on your bike of sort of purpose to, that a sort of listener or a celebrity brings to the table. It's absolutely got to sort of, walk the walk. And I would say, younger audiences are way more switched on to authenticity and people meaning what they say and doing what they say they're going to do than ever. And they hold us to huge account on that. And I celebrate that because it makes us work harder, makes me make sure I need to hire the right people and generally be better. Yeah.
I was going to bring him here, and we seem to have temporarily lost him for a moment. So hopefully he'll be back with us soon. But I guess generally, is this a problem for us that we're going to get so sort of wound up in these messaging and so on that actually we need to get a bit back to basics perhaps, and then just as Harry was sort of alluding to there, just assume or accept that these things are diversity and so on are going to be part of the brand's DNA anyway. Then we can just get on with the business of selling, if you like.
I think that they're part of a good brand's DNA, and I think Rebecca coined the word there, authenticity. That's what it is, and by definition that means not selling in your good behaviours and how worthy you are. You live them and exist them, and let your audience discover them. This is the one via social channels, via your content, they'll discover your good behaviours. They'll see it, and if your intent is correct, then they won't bust you with cynicism because And let's face it, there's plenty of brands out there that hang their hat on various worthy trees, whether it's environmental or societal or around the mental health question. Some of them are authentic, but there's an awful lot of them where you dig a millimeter under the surface and you go, hang on a sec, you're saying that, but here's some of the other behaviors over here, and it's the opposite. And I believe audiences, when they do inevitably discover these things, they lose trust, the integrity piece goes, the relationship breaks down. Now, these are the key things, these are key hinges on which brand marketing is built. These are the reason people that shop with brands, have ongoing relationships with brands, spend their money with brands, which ultimately is what we're all charged with doing, is getting customers who spend. And if that relationship breaks down, then that's a massive error, because what it should be is a long relationship that is continuously fruitful and built on trust and goodwill, which is hinged in the truth. So I think, a long-term brand goal is to do it correctly. If you have a space in a certain area, formerly known as purpose, great, go and act it, go and do it, let people discover it, and do it forever and ever and ever. And well done. I think you'll succeed with that approach. But you force feed it to people, especially a younger audience who are naturally cynical and investigative anyway. And I think you'll be called out. And there's plenty of examples of the corpses of brands. Brewdog this week, which is a wonderful example of a brand coming unstuck in public, which I'm, schadenfreude isn't even the word, but the mirth I'm seeing in that scenario. That's what happens. The trust disappears, and there isn't a relationship. So I think it's very important to take it seriously and enact on your behaviours at a foundational level.
Mm-hmm. I know we sort of lost you for sort of a minute there, but hopefully you sort of caught the gist of what we were talking about there. Does all these sort of issues, does it sort of feed into your messaging and campaigns? And I guess particularly we'll talk about radio here as well, but is that on your mind a lot, or do you just sort of, as I say, just sort of stick to the basics a lot of the time?
I disaggregate the two. So there's lots of things we have to do, especially working in foods. So there's the carbon stuff we're doing, the looking after our staff, the mental health. There's all these things we're doing. We try and kind of have that elsewhere, because our main purpose is the brand benefit. Like we're talking about KFC being one of your biggest clients, Rebecca, but KFC's purpose is to give people great fried chicken, and that has to be, so your product has to be your purpose. The other things that we do are just hygiene factors, just being, if you imagine a brand as a person, you should be a good person. So they're just things you have to do, and we do them and we have them, and it shouldn't be what you're leading with. I know Nando's are very shouting about their carbon neutral credentials, etc., but that's different. That unless you happen to be Greenpeace, that can't be your main purpose. Your purpose has to be your consumer benefit, because if you're not providing that, if that's not what you are doing, then it doesn't matter what else you do, because people won't buy your product. So it doesn't matter if you go carbon neutral, because someone else will take your customers. So that's the problem. So it's almost like a pyramid. Your main purpose has to be doing right by your customers, giving them what they want to do. And then, we take it, anything we do around the sustainability pieces and stuff, we kind of do it by stealth, behind the scenes, and we just work on it, because consumers want it to be easy. They don't want to be preached at about it. They don't want to be told what to do. They just want you to do the work behind the scenes. So primarily, that you've got to give them like Harvest is one of our biggest brands. One of our biggest purposes is you turn up with your kids and they can run around, scream, destroy the place. The thing is, we will feed you and look after your children. That's our purpose. Everything else we do behind the scenes is, just things you have to do. It can't be the primary purpose, and you can't preach about it.
Absolutely. We've still got a few minutes left, so just to say to people, if you want to send any questions in, there is a tab that allows you to do that. We've also had a poll running. Let me just quickly read out a question for this. I think we can show it on screen as well. Do you focus on multi-channel or solo campaigns, or a mix of the two? I don't know if that's coming up on the screen. Yeah, and that's fairly 100% there. Does that sort of surprise anybody, or
No. In short, I I don't think I've ever seen a poll that looks like that, to be honest.
No.
It's quite satisfying, isn't it? I think it would be crazy in 2022 if we weren't all thinking in a multi-channel way, not least because the diversity of media consumption and the fragmentation of media consumption. In radio, we know that commercial radio reaches at record times, but we also know that for younger audience that hours across the industry are going down. The amount of time that people are spending, even with Facebook, is going down because there's just more stuff for everybody to spend time with. So that's the kind of the pros and the cons. But yeah, I mean, gosh, in short, I don't know Harry or Amir, but it doesn't feel like a huge surprise to me that people are taking a multi-channel approach. We celebrate that.
No, good.
Okay. I know I said I'd only planned 20 minutes or so, but this is, yeah, well, there you go. I'm going to stop on that particular point. I hope that was interesting. It was definitely, okay, well, it was interesting to me. And so I really do hope that you did learn something. It's something on the share there. And let me just go back out. And I'll see you next week for our live class. Cheers. Bye.